Hi guys, it's Jo. I thought I'd make the most of this amazing weather and beautiful tree to do a bit of a knit and chat with me. So I'm Jo, I'm the Millennial Knitter. I do some videos over here on YouTube and on Instagram. I've been knitting for about 6 months, or maybe a bit longer now actually. I started knitting in October of last year, so it's maybe a bit more than 6 months now. And I've been trying to share my knitting journey with you guys. So get cosy, get your knitting, see if you can find somewhere really beautiful to knit like I have, and yeah, let's catch up. So today I thought I'd talk a little bit about family history of knitting for me, and it's partly because sadly last week we lost my grandma, and one of the things that I discovered when we were doing the sad task of looking through the house was a bunch of old knitting patterns and some half-finished projects that she had been working on before. She unfortunately wasn't well enough to be knitting. And one of the things I thought I'd do in an upcoming video was show you guys some of the patterns. There's some amazing 70s treats in store there, I can tell you. And maybe try and finish a couple of the pieces she was working on. From having a quick look, I think she was working on a baby's jacket. I think it might be a really nice tribute to her to try and finish that. And some of the patterns look a bit dated, but I'm guessing if I updated the yarn choices, maybe I could make some of those. So I don't know what you guys think, but I thought that might be quite a nice thing to share. But yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about my family's history of knitting and how I learned, all that kind of stuff. So my mum knits still, and I had grown up seeing her knit on and off, not loads, like I don't know if she's ever made an adult jumper, but my brother has 2 children, and a couple of my friends that I'm really close with have had kids, and mum has made them some really beautiful things, some cardigans, little baby jumpers, that kind of thing. And I've seen mum making socks with multiple needles, which I was always super impressed and intimidated by. So I always knew she could knit, but she wasn't like an obsessive knitter like I've become. I didn't see her always with her knitting in her hands. So I kind of knew about knitting, knew it was a thing, and mum had tried on and off over the years to get me interested and to get me physically able to do it. Because of my dyspraxia, that had been a bit of a challenge. So mum definitely is a family knitter. And then I was thinking about other parts of the family. So my dad's mum was definitely a knitter, and she taught me when I was teeny tiny to knit a scarf for my brother's teddy bear. I think possibly a hat as well. I've no idea where those things went. I suspect they were not brilliant knitting, but I would love to find them someday, so I might have to ask my brother if he's still got hold of them. So yeah, so that's the gran on my dad's side. And then my grandma, I knew she was a crocheter because one year I got in a ton of trouble for accidentally, as kids do, fiddling with her crocheted tablecloth. There was this table in her hallway that had a crocheted tablecloth, and I think I just kind of picked at the edges and managed to unravel a massive chunk of it. So I was, as you can imagine, pretty unpopular for doing that. So I knew she crocheted, and then I remember seeing her with a big bag of yarn and stuff, but I don't think I ever actually saw her knit. Like, I don't think I ever saw her actually move the needles. So I think I knew she could knit, but I don't think I'd ever seen her do it. So finding this bag of patterns and yarn was really fascinating, and it's a bit too sad for me to look just now, but in a few weeks' time I'd like to look through it with you guys and show you the kinds of things that she's got in there, and maybe you think about making something. And then I was thinking about other parts of the family. So I don't think my auntie knits, but we're all quite crafty. So yeah, I'd love to know from you guys. Do you have families of knitters? Are you the first in your family? Are you the latest in a long line of knitters? I'd be really interested to know. When I was up in Scotland for my grand's funeral, I also managed to meet my partner's grandma, and she used to be a knitter as well. So that was really lovely. I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this was there is this lovely sense of community amongst knitters. Like, I'm sure as I'm sitting here, somebody's going to come and chat to me about my knitting, because almost every time that I knit outside a coffee shop or somewhere, someone will come and talk to me about it, and they'll talk about their grandma, or they'll talk about the knitting that they do, or just like ask me what I'm up to. Is it knitting? Is it crochet? And it does seem to have this lovely sense of community to it and history. And I am, in amongst feelings about Gran, really pleased that I'm continuing some of that tradition. I think she would really like that. There's a lot of other we're quite a DIY-y family, so we make jam and do crafts and things, and it feels like this is just like another way of carrying on some of that family legacy. So yeah, I feel pleased about that. A few years ago I wouldn't have been able to do that, and those patterns maybe wouldn't have been kept by anybody, because they don't really have any, old patterns don't really have any value to them unless they're special to you for some reason. So the other kind of thing I was thinking about chatting about today was just more around knitting community and any advice you've got really for how to build mine, because I'm building one online, which is brilliant. I'm really enjoying that. There's so many brilliant YouTubers that I watch, and I really like their kind of chattiness. Like I'll list a few that I really enjoy, but Carolina Knits, she's fab. She's in Scotland. Penrose Knits, really like watching her stuff. Well Love Knits and all these kind of guys. But I don't have any knitting friends locally, and there have been times recently, especially, I'll come on to some of my knitting challenges in a bit. There's been some times recently where I would have loved to have had a local knitting pal that I could just show my work to and go, oh God, I've kind of deviated from the pattern here a little bit and it's all gone a bit wrong. Any suggestions? Could you help me? That kind of thing. And don't want to be critical, but my local yarn shop has quite limited opening hours, and what that seems to have translated into is every time I go in there they are absolutely packed, which is great. Like, don't get me wrong, I want them to be busy because they have beautiful yarn, and I want them to keep selling beautiful yarn to people so that they're still available for me to buy beautiful yarn from. But it has meant that I haven't felt like I could ask them for advice, because they've had a queue of half a dozen people trying to buy bits and bobs. Doesn't really feel like where you could ask for advice. So I feel like I need another way to find my kind of knitting gang. I've done a few online things and they've been really nice. I've enjoyed those. Again, Carolina Knits did one and that was really fun. But I'd like to think about doing something in person. I don't know about you guys, I'm still a bit nervous around being in big groups of people, because we've got vulnerable people in the family for whom COVID would be a big deal even now. So I've steered away from it a little bit, but I'd love to know from you what your experiences have been with knitting groups. Have they been worth it? Has it been a really enjoyable thing for you? Should I join one? Is there some other way of connecting with knitting community that I haven't thought of? And who do you learn from? Like, I am knitting my little heart out, and I'm sure that there are tricks that I'm missing. Like, I've noticed recently, I'm an English style knitter, so as I'm knitting English style, which you can probably tell, and I have picked up 2 ways of moving the yarn over. So one is this kind of flicking motion that I do that feels the most natural, but eventually that seems to start to hurt my hand because I think I move my whole hand to do it. So I also try to do this one where I hold the yarn up so it kind of moves my fingers less. But again, if I had knitting pals locally, they could maybe say, oh, have you thought about this other way of holding your yarn? Now I'm going to make this look really awkward as I'm doing this. But yeah, if I had local knitting pals, maybe they'd be able to look at what I was doing and go, oh, have you thought about doing X, Y and Z? Because none of my close friends knit or even know how to knit, I don't think. One good friend of mine who lives in the Midlands knits, so I'll definitely catch up with her. Actually gave her a couple of lessons when I was there, so she would be great to chat to, but she's not local and she can't help me with my kind of immediate dilemmas when they come up. So yeah, how do you find your knitting pals, your knitting community? Is there something I've missed? I also wanted to talk a bit about seasonal knitting today. So you can see that I'm still working on this chunky cardigan, which I'm determined to get finished. You'll see it in my blogs. And it's not a million miles away, but what I really want to be knitting are like linen t-shirts and stripy jumpers and things, because it's spring and it'll soon be summer. But I'm torn about it, because I made myself this lovely linen and, no, not linen, nonsense, bamboo and cotton t-shirt, and it's great, I want it loads, but it really hurt my hands to knit it to begin with, so I'm kind of hesitant to, I've heard that linen is even worse on your hands, so I'm a bit hesitant to pick up my linen and start doing that. I also I've got this Daphne top that I'm kind of hopefully halfway through, that I've made a couple of errors with, so I might need to frog it. Basically, I thought I'd be clever and add a border on the bottom in, what kind of stitch was it? Garter stitch, so a squishy bottom, and it keeps curling up. So I think I'm going to have to rip it back. And also, I think I was getting impatient. I was knitting it on the train. I was getting impatient, and I think I need to rip it back and knit it just 2 inches longer. Otherwise, I'm kidding myself, because I'm not going to wear it cropped. So I do need to actually do that. So anyway, working my way through the Daphne, which will be great when it's done. But I've got so many things that I want to have knitted, and only this one pair of little knitting hands. And I don't know how you guys feel about that. Like, do you get stressed isn't the right word, but do you get upset when you feel like you're not making enough knitting progress? So yeah, I feel like the rush of a finished project is what keeps me excited about knitting. And I've got, how many on the needles just now? Just 2 on the needles right now. But I've also got I've kind of got a commitment, which is my partner very kindly bought me a kit from We Are Knitters that is lovely marshmallow pastel yarn, which is really lovely. My concern about knitting it is it's wool, it's the petite wool from We Are Knitters, and I'm just not going to want to wear it if I knit a big wool jumper in April. It'll be May, June by the time I finish it, so I don't know whether I should knit something else, like use the yarn but knit something else. I would have knit a cardigan, but I'm literally making one right now, so I'm not sure if I need 2 chunky wool hand knit cardigans immediately next to each other. Or do I try and knit I was thinking about maybe knitting a lace work jumper with it. So maybe I was thinking, like, maybe if it was wool but it was open kind of lace work on the front and things, it would be a bit airier. Or do I just make it and then save it for the winter, which seems like that would be a bit kind of depressing. I don't know, what would you do? Because he's obviously spent, a fair amount of money buying me the yarn and buying me the kit and things, so wants to see me making it and wearing it. But it's not the kind of thing I really want to be making right now. So I don't know how to handle that in a kind of kind way, because I know I'll love it once I make it. The yarn is absolutely beautiful. He's chosen the best colour scheme for me. It's this, I don't know if you can see today, but I'm wearing these Lucy and Yak pink and green and blue trousers, and the marshmallow yarn would actually be literally a perfect match with these. So the boy done good picking the colours. It's just that it's heavy wool, and I'd also purchased for myself recently some half cotton, half merino, which I really want to knit up into a French kind of something, I guess, a bit like this. So I want something with a collar and then the kind of classic blue and white stripe. So that's what I really want to be knitting, but I feel like I'm kind of obligated to knit this other jumper first, which is a horrible way to feel about knitting a jumper, because what a privilege to be able to knit something lovely with really nice yarn. But that is how I feel. So I've got to decide what I'm going to do about that one. What would you do? Would you knit the jumper he gave you? Would you knit with the yarn and just tweak it to a different kind of jumper and hope he doesn't notice? Would you knit yourself a cardigan even though you've just knit a chunky wool cardigan? Would you knit some kind of other cardigan? The other thing that puts me off the cardigan is, my goodness, isn't it a lot of work knitting back and forth when you've once you've got used to circular needles and you can knit in the round, the thought of knitting back and forth and how slow that is in comparison with the pearls and everything is really off-putting for making a cardigan. And I know I could steek, but I don't really want to. I have done it with something else. I don't feel like that's the right solution for this either. So yeah, that's my yarny dilemma, is what do I make next? I'm hoping that this cardigan that I'm working on now should be off my needles the next, what would be really nice if it was in the next week or so, because again, I don't really want this to be finished just as it enters like 90-degree weather here. Knowing England, I've probably got a bit longer before I need to worry about that, as we're only in April, but even so, it would be so nice to be wearing this soon and hoping that I still love it. That's the other thing that I've been thinking about a lot with knitting. Because it takes so long to make something, I really worry that I will have gone off this jumper by the time I finished it, this cardigan. I loved it when I started it. I still like the beige and the yellow that you can see in it. I am not super sold on the brown kind of edging. It's partly because this started as a scrap project. I was using up some yarn that I'd had to buy because I'd messed up a pattern that I was making, and started this as a scrap project. It has since evolved into requiring its own yarn, of course. I don't know who I thought I was kidding, thinking I could do this with scraps. But I am worried that I don't love the brown, and I've got a decision to make soon because the front of the cardigan has this heavy shawl collar in the pattern, so I need to decide, am I going to echo the bottom? So I've got to decide if I'm going to echo the bottom brown ribbing, which is what the pattern would have me do, or do the neon, or do the beige, or I don't know, something else. I've got to make a decision about that, and I'm not sold on the brown. I think the brown might limit how much I wear the cardigan, because at the moment with the ivory and neon I feel like I could wear that with kind of anything, but having the warm tone at the bottom makes me think, well, is that limiting it to kind of wearing it with more neutral things? And as you can probably see from the jeans I showed you earlier, neutrals aren't massively my thing. I'm more pastels and brights, with white and cream in there. So yeah, the knitter's dilemma. What do I pair this with? Answers on a postcard, please. Also, when I've been thinking about what else to knit for the summer, I've been thinking about vests. So I've got this lovely linen at home that before I was kind of exposed to the realities of knitting with bamboo cotton, I was like, oh yeah, I could whiz up a linen vest or something, that would be fine. Now I'm a bit frightened to use it because I'm worried it was going to be really sore on my hands. And I'm also a bit like, I know I'll value this cardigan. I know that I'll value a chunky wool cardigan, and that I'll appreciate that it's handmade because it feels like a proper garment. But vests, maybe it's just part of unlearning my bad fast fashion habits, but vests feel quite disposable. And I would hate to spend all the time and effort knitting something for it to feel not special, for it to feel like not a... luxury is not quite the right word, but not like a garment that I really care about. And I wonder if a vest is too prosaic or too kind of simple to be worth putting the time into. So what that's been leading me to think is, well, does it need to be a vest then that's got like ribbing or lace or some kind of detailing that I couldn't easily just get by popping down to H&M, which I know is not the attitude, but that's how I think about it. So I have seen some really lovely ribbed vests that I thought, well, that could be really beautiful. But then we come back to is that going to take literally a week, like 100 years to knit because it's ribbed, 1x1 rib or 2x2 rib? And if so, is that going to absolutely kill my hands because of the realities of working with linen? So many thoughts there. I was also thinking about, could it just be something really like light and open, like one of those kind of boat neck 3/4 length sleeve tops that you can fling on top of your swimsuit or something on the beach. If I ever get a beach holiday this year, I feel like that'd be something I'd definitely use. So thinking about that too. And just, really trying to start planning the next couple of months of knitting. I think that I can basically do 1 or 2 finished objects a month. I don't know if that's considered fast or slow for people, but having looked back at what I've made, that seemed to be roughly right. 1, maybe 2 at a push, depending on the size of the garment. And I'm definitely getting quicker at knitting, but I'm also starting to knit more complicated things. So I think the first jumper I made probably take me less time than this cardigan. But then I think to myself, well, of course it did, because it was really, really simple. It was a simple knit. It was a panel knit back and forth in straight needles, and knit on much chunkier gauge. I think that's the other thing I'm noticing as well, is as I'm evolving as a knitter, I'm moving on to smaller gauge yarn, which is lovely, but so slow. It feels so slow. So this Daphne top I've been making, which is gorgeous, is on 4mm needles, and compared to this, it feels like it takes forever to get a couple of inches done. So I'm kind of trying to balance that with how much more wear I'm likely to get out of something that's knit a bit finer gauge, because chunky knits are lovely, but you can't wear them all the time in all seasons, whereas I'm hoping something on finer gauge probably is a bit more wearable. And then in terms of what I'm thinking about knitting next, I've talked about this a little bit before, but the Soufflé tee is in my plans. I'm a bit worried about it in case it's too hot. Like if I find it too warm to wear, because I do overheat a lot, but fingers crossed it'll be maybe something I can wear in the evening without a coat or something like that. That kind of a top, which would be really nice to have. And again, I've gone for something neutral, which is unusual for me, but maybe that unusualness will make it a bit more wearable than something really heavily patterned. So yeah, that's what I'm planning on working on next. The other thing I've been thinking about a lot is like a time to knit, and trying to get the right balance between knitting loads and knitting too much that my hands hurt, then I have to take a break and the whole process slows down again. What I've found is working for me so far is a combination of different sizes of project. So yeah, different sizes of project, and by that I mean both like the size of the finished garment, so socks or something, versus a jumper, and the size of the needles. So what was working really well for me, and it might cause me to cast on some more socks, was having socks, this chunky cardigan, and the finer knit of the t-shirt when I was working on all three of those. That seemed to be really good for getting quite a lot of knitting done without totally destroying my hands, because I was able to, do a bit on the sock, and the sock was really portable, so that was quite nice when I was in between meetings or just taking it to a coffee shop for half an hour. A sock is a nice easy one to carry around with me. This jumper is a bit chunky to carry around with me really, but I'm desperate to get it finished. And having the combination of working on tiny sock needles and then on bigger chunkier needles, that seemed to be really helpful as well. So I might try and cast on another little pair of socks. I suppose I should really make some for myself. I do wonder if I would wear handmade socks though, because they are so beautiful and there's so much work that's gone into them that, could I actually bring myself to wear them? I don't know, do you wear yours? I can understand gifting them, because that feels like a good use of my labour. Gifting them to somebody that will know, because I will tell them how precious they are and will appreciate them as a gift. And me, who would I just end up putting them in the wash with all my other socks and wondering, was this worth it? So that's the debate. And then if I were to knit somebody's socks, who deserves them? Who deserves the socks? One of the people I'm thinking about is my partner's gran. Would she like some handmade socks maybe for Christmas? Might take me a bit of a run up to knit her some socks. Took quite a long time to make the socks for my mum, but I think that's the kind of gift somebody would appreciate. And as she used to knit, I feel like maybe she would really appreciate them, because she'd know the work that's gone into them. I don't think my partner would appreciate them enough. He wants me to knit him a blanket, but I have not got a whole lifetime to knit something like a blanket, because he also wants it to be on fine yarn. So I think he perhaps doesn't really understand quite how long that would take me, and quite how much knitting and money would be involved in that. But maybe I'll start on that if I get really stuck for a project. I really like those, I don't know if they're still cool, but I really like those temperature blankets that people seem to be knitting for a while. I like the idea of the kind of colour change and charting a year or something. So maybe that would be something to do. But I feel like I'd probably have to start that. Do you have to start that on the 1st of January? Is that the thing? You have to start it and do it for the whole year? So yeah, so that's one of the other things I've been thinking about. And then what else have I been thinking about with my knitting? I've been thinking about how I could knit faster. And as I was saying, partly that's I need a bit of knitting community around me to help me knit faster or learn how to knit faster. And partly that's just forcing my hands to do things a bit differently to make it faster. So as I'm chatting to you guys, I've reverted back to my most natural feeling way of doing it with this looping over. But I think the other way, the kind of holding the yarn up and flicking, seems to be faster. And I know that I should try continental. Like, I know everybody says continental is faster, but the thought of having to make a project and struggling through it all with the knitting feeling wrong, in inverted commas, is just not super appealing right now. Like, all I want to be doing is making myself beautiful yarn things. I think that's been the other thing. It's been interesting for me as part of my knitting journey that when I started, I made almost exclusively gifts. So I made a bunch of snoods and hats and scarves and that kind of thing as gifts. And then as I've started to get, I'm not good yet, as I've started to get, intermediate at knitting, this world of amazing things that I could have in my life because I had made them with my own hands has totally opened up for me. And I have become a really selfish knitter, which is horrible. I like to give gifts and I like to make things for people, but the thought of making a jumper for somebody when I could make a jumper for myself is quite challenging. Isn't that dreadful? I think partly it's because I have gotten into what I think is quite a good habit now, is if I see, like, I'm obsessed with looking at knitwear everywhere now, cheap knitwear, fancy knitwear, and trying to say to myself, like, could I make that? Instead of buying it, which I want to do, like I've been eyeing up this Marks & Spencer's blue and white striped jumper with a zip for ages, and I have managed to avoid buying it for myself because I have the yarn to make something very similar, and I should is not a good word, but I should really just make it for myself with something a bit more beautiful and probably a lot more sustainable, because I suspect the M&S one will be probably acrylic or nylon or something. I haven't actually seen it in a store, I've just seen it in all their adverts, and the woman wearing it looking like super chic and like she lives in the south of France and eats croissants and things, and that is who I'd like to be. So I've been trying to put myself off buying beautiful knitwear by saying, well, I could make beautiful knitwear. So the other place that I stalk quite religiously is And Other Stories, and they have such beautiful stuff. One of the ones I'm looking at the moment is, I've obviously got to think about collars. They have this collared merino cable knit jumper, and it's expensive-ish. I think it's just under £100, which is obviously a lot of money to spend on a jumper. It's probably not that much money to spend on a cable knit merino jumper, because I suspect if I was to buy the yarn for myself for that, it would be £30-40 upwards, not including all the labour. So it's not expensive in the sense of how much fashion things should cost us, but it is an expensive jumper. And I keep looking at it and thinking, I could knit it myself. I probably could knit this. I haven't done cable yet, but the thought of that and the hours that would take to make and how much I want it is making me quite a selfish knitter, because I think, well, I could, if I were to make a jumper for somebody else, like I've got this yarn that's really a bit owed to my mum, no, that I've bought thinking I'll make her a really lovely jumper, and it's this Adriana Phil, I might be saying that wrong, but it's an alpaca merino, and it's gorgeous. It's brown. I've shown it in a couple of other podcasts. It's brown, cream and grey twist, and it would make her a lovely jumper, and I should make that for her soon because her birthday's in June, and I suppose if I cast it on now I could probably make it by June. Look, see, I'm trying to talk myself into it, but would I rather make myself another jumper by June? And I think we know that the answer to that is yes, and I've only got one pair of hands, so how do I manage that? How do I manage my selfishness with a desire to make people beautiful things? What does one do about that? So far it's been that I've just made smaller projects, and that's not so bad because you can knock out a pair of hand warmers or whatever in an afternoon, really, even nice ones. And I know when it comes around to the winter again, I'll be more interested in knitting people Christmas presents. Like I was already talking about what I make for my partner's grandma. So I'm sure I will get back into gift knitting, but yeah, the thought of making Mum the jumper right now is not that appealing, which is dreadful because I should make her something nice. So yeah, please leave comments telling me to be a better daughter and to make something nice for my mum, not just make myself beautiful, beautiful things. I think the last thing I was going to talk about today was just the finances involved in knitting. So I'm trying to walk a fine line at the moment with it. I definitely only want to make things with pretty nice yarn, and I am lucky that I can afford to buy pretty nice yarn. And my reasons for that are partly just quality. So I have been brought up with Scottish family who basically only let you wear wool or cashmere if you're really lucky. Acrylic jumpers are no good to you when it's very cold. They're no good to you in the north. So we always had natural fibres basically, which is super privileged, I know. So I don't mean to disparage anybody who didn't have that experience. But that's what I grew up with. I grew up with wool and sometimes cashmere if I could raid mum's closet. So natural fibres absolutely are a thing for me. And I'm somebody who overheats quite easily. So I find that acrylic stuff gets really sweaty and really sticky, which is not super pleasant. So that has a cost to it. And I think the other side of it is, again, I'm sure lots of people think this, but if I'm going to put all this time into making something, I want it to be something that I will love and that will last, and that is of a quality that represents the time that's gone into it. And I also think about the time thing, that one of the reasons I've been kind of excusing the cost to myself is that it's partly the cost of the garment, but it's also the cost of the hobby. So it's like, what are my other hobbies? What would I otherwise be spending money on? And am I basically replacing that activity that would cost a certain amount of money with another activity that both costs a certain amount of money and results in me having a garment in my wardrobe? So I've been trying to argue at that way. But I am probably spending too much at the moment on yarn, and I need to find a way to just slow it down a bit without... The thing is that buying new yarn is lovely and is a fun and kind of exciting way to stay connected with this hobby that I've developed. So I don't want to put myself on a buying ban or anything like that. I think it's also that as I'm buying yarn now, I'm really keen to I'm basically buying jumper quantities each time so that I can make a finished garment. And that is probably also part of the problem. I think I need to maybe get more excited about making accessories for myself so that I could buy just a skein of something beautiful and know that will turn into an accessory. So that's maybe something I should think about. And again, if you've got any recommendations for really gorgeous accessory patterns, like I'd quite like a shrug. I don't think that I'm into shawls. I know shawls are a big thing for people. I don't think I'd wear a shawl. I think I'd always garrote myself in a scarf. So I don't think a shawl's really for me. But I did think maybe like a shrug or like little boleros or something. I thought maybe do you reckon that would take like one skein, maybe? Something like that. So thinking about that kind of thing. And maybe that's something I should put some of my knitting efforts into. But yeah, I think I'm about to be invaded by some kids looking to come and play under the cherry blossoms, so I should probably sign off soon. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed having an excuse to chat and to knit at the same time. I've been assaulted by the cherry blossoms. I'm probably covered in them. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give me a like, please give me a subscribe. I'm hoping more people will find my videos, and you can find me over on Instagram as the Millennial Knitter. And yeah, let's chat soon. Bye guys.